Coming up today, the Ovation set sail through another port of call visit with the Endicott Arms and Dawes Glacier visit. She also learns to dance through the night, and we learn all about Live.Love.Legs. It's all coming up, so let's set sail. Welcome to day 9 of the cruise view from onboard the Ovation of the Seas inaugural Alaskan sailing. Today was Tuesday, May 21st, 2019, and the last port of call for this voyage. Our location for today was at Endicott Arm and Dawes Glacier, Alaska. We were sailing there from 7 a.m. to noon, and at noon our location was 57 degrees and 37 minutes north by 133 degrees and 14 minutes west to be exact. This morning we entered the area at about 7 a.m. as scheduled. We ultimately reached the glacier at 9 a.m. after sailing through large fields of icebergs and general all sizes of ice floating in that water. Then after about 45 minutes there we left, headed back out the way we had come, and by noon, as scheduled, we put it back into full speed and headed off towards the Pacific Ocean again. Tonight, we did enter the Pacific Ocean at about 9 p.m. to start that voyage back down south to make it to Seattle for the first ever time. For the weather today, we had a sunrise this morning at 4:19 a.m., and this evening we had a sunset at 9:39 p.m. See that off the side of the ship as we have the past couple days, that nice glow. Haven't really been able to catch the actual sun dropping below the horizon line, but I have seen that glow almost every night this voyage. Temperatures today, we had a bit of chilly conditions this morning when we first started that sailing event, but as the day went on, as the morning grew sunnier and more beautiful out there, the temperatures rose very quickly. We had a high of 57 degrees and we had pretty clear skies. There was some cloud cover, but for the most part it was sunny blue skies, and that made it feel very warm out there for this day. And that was perfect for another one of those sailing mornings where we spent trying to sightsee off of the ship itself. We had smooth seas as we were inland during most of the day, and a wind speed of about 7 knots out there. This evening, once we hit the Pacific Ocean, things started to rock and roll around the ship. The seas certainly look a bit mean out there right now. There's a lot of huge waves battering the side of the ship, but for the most part, if you go out on the port side, you're going to see those massive waves, and if you go on the starboard side, it's pretty calm over there. We're not seeing massive white caps or signs of insanely rough seas, but certainly some very large waves hitting the ship right now, and you can definitely feel the movement throughout the ship. Compared to the rest of the class, though, she is pretty quiet. The Quantum class in general has always seemed to creak and make noise with the gentlest of sea conditions, but for what we're seeing out there, the Ovation of the Seas isn't making all that much noise for how bad it looks outside and how much movement you can certainly feel around the ship. Leaving the shows this evening as everybody walked down the via back to the Royal Esplanade from 270, you just saw everybody do that nice little S-walk as the ship swayed side to side, so it's certainly noticeable, but the ship seems to be handling it just fine and probably much better than her sisters based on the lack of sound that we're hearing, certainly none of the popping and banging of the elevators that we often hear on most ships. So then looking at the compass and what went on today, we did start the morning with that sailing port visit, and that meant I woke up at 6:15 this morning to try and be ready, catch that from beginning to end, and by 6:45 I was up on the top deck. As I mentioned, it was chilly. The way this one started, since it was essentially just sailing through some waterways to the glacier, the only difference was in that area there was a lot of ice floating in the water. So for the most part, when that started, it was just a natural progression of what had already been happening throughout the morning. And with that, we had an announcement from the captain about the need to keep quiet during this event, that we don't want to disrupt the nature, cause any harm to the region, so all noise had to be kept to a minimum. They had no music playing for pretty much any outdoor space during the duration of it. They also asked guests to keep it a bit quieter and avoid loud noise to help keep the sound pollution down as well. But that announcement brings me to a topic that I haven't really discussed this one, and that is the return of the noon announcements. There's been a noon announcement on the sea days of this voyage, but the PA system on the ship seems very odd compared to the others. Normally a captain's announcement, such as this one about keeping quiet this morning and the start of the big event, would have gone out through the whole ship, through every speaker that could, including theaters. But in the case of the Ovation, it seems pretty limited. I was back at the sport deck at the time, could hear a captain making an announcement, headed off to try and see if I could hear it inside the Seaplex, but there was no sound in the Seaplex either. Headed all the way to the outdoor pool deck, and there you could clearly hear it was playing there. So for some reason, these announcements from the captain do not go very far into the ship. One day I tried to wait in the passenger quarter, as I often do, to get a clearer audio out of the announcement, and didn't hear any announcement come through either. So it appears the announcements are restricted very heavily to just certain public spaces, and so far that's meant it's been kind of difficult to find these announcements, unfortunately. And I'm not quite sure why Ovation is set differently than the other ships, because that was not the case on Quantum, Anthem, or any of the other Royal Caribbean ships, for those captain announcements really did interrupt everything that was going on. So as I mentioned, the true event started at about 7 a.m., and at that time we were just surrounded by ice. Everywhere you looked you could see some ice floating, and we were doing a bit of that bob and weave like we saw at Hoover Glacier to make our way through. We're also surrounded by giant mountains on either side of the ship, a very narrow passageway that just seemed to keep winding endlessly. Every time we made our way around a turn, there was another turn up ahead that you couldn't see past, so it was a really lengthy and windy, interesting voyage up to the glacier. You never knew which way you were going to go because you couldn't quite tell where the true openings were as we were making that sailing through. For that, I started on the top deck, got some nice views, but it was very crowded up there, a lot of noise and conversations going on. So I headed down to deck 5 where it was empty and nice and quiet, and most importantly, the view was significantly better from deck 5. Deck 5, you just are so much closer, you can truly hear everything going on out there. You can hear the ice in the water, you can hear everything that's going past the ship, and you can hear things oftentimes that you don't even notice with your eyes because it's just so noisy with all the ice and everything that's happening around the ship that you know what's happening. Where up top you kind of feel disconnected, you don't realize just what's going on out there. And that includes the waterfalls. There were tons of waterfalls that we saw today, and most of those waterfalls, especially the bigger ones, were audible just from the ship. So you could be on the ship, see the waterfall, and hear that beautiful sound of the water flowing down the mountains. Once we reached the glacier then, Captain put things in view mode. No longer needed to progress forward, but get everybody a nice shot of that glacier. It was a much quicker routine than we saw with the Hoover Glacier, where the entire event was spent at the glacier for several hours. This one, some of the event did include that ride, so instead, once the captain got there, he was pulling forward, so the forward part of the ship got a view. He then took a left-hand turn towards the port side, giving the entire starboard side of the ship a beautiful view of that glacier. After a little while, he then turned the ships to the starboard side, rotating around so the forward saw the glacier again, and then the port side got a beautiful full view. And after a few minutes, he then continued that rotation, allowing the aft of the ship to get a view of the glacier, which included 270 with some beautiful views right out of the windows in 270. And then almost immediately he progressed forward from that position to start making his way back out. So everybody on the ship got a great view of that glacier. You needed to make sure you were there because it was a much shorter window that you had to actually see that glacier, since it was just one portion of the voyage. But most people did seem to get a chance to see it because all the outside decks were full, and the inside decks they moved around seemed pretty well empty at this point. And compared to Hoover Glacier, where we could see ice falling, breaking, we could hear it, there was none of that. The glacier, for the most part, was pretty steady with no sound or any movement involved in it this time. We did see one chunk of ice that was floating by that ended up rotating and flipping, and that caused a bit of turmoil in the ice field, but beyond that, there really wasn't a whole lot of movement beyond what we were generating ourselves. So that lasted until noon, and pretty much at exactly noon the captain was clear enough, and you could just feel that moment that he put it back into full speed to start sailing away again. So then after that I had a bit of time to go get some lunch. I went to the Windjammer, ate out on that back deck with that beautiful view. Once again, it was warm enough. Pretty much the entire voyage it's been warm enough to use that deck, which is a great thing, because normally on these Alaskan sailings it can be a little bit chilly, but we have not really had those kinds of conditions yet this voyage. So I had my lunch out on that back deck, beautiful view, then headed to 270 for the enrichment lecture with David Greenstein on Animals of Alaska. That was at 1:30, and that offered the perfect chance to sit in 270, get that great view of the ocean, the mountains, the nature, everything going by behind the ship, along with that lecture that was happening. And so that lecture included all the different animals that are in Alaska, everything from the moose and bears to the bald eagles, and of course the whales that everyone wants to see. And after that event ended, while waiting for the next event to start, there was a whale spotting of a couple of whales right outside the ship, and sitting up in 270 you had a perfect view to be able to see those whales that were swimming by at the time. So then after that, staying right in 270 was the Royal Caribbean Story Part 2. Saw Part 2 and small bits of it on the Anthem of the Seas. Didn't get to watch the full thing. During that one, the small parts I saw felt very much like a sales pitch, and it was very outdated at the time. On board this ship, though, everything was up to date, and it seemed like it was the cruise director staff that was updating it, some of it on the fly, some in advance, but in either case it at least felt current. On Anthem, it was very awkward when they started talking about the upcoming Quantum class of ships and all the amenities it was going to offer when we're sitting on the second ship in that class. So this time we're on the Ovation, sees the third ship in the class, and obviously that would have been very awkward if they had continued that line of talk. But instead, they not only recognized that the Quantum class launched and all those features, but they recognized the fact that Spectrum of the Seas just launched a month ago. So it really helped bring things up to date. I mentioned the Harmony and the Symphony that were completely ignored in the Anthem show, and included everything up to date, and even updated the Empress of the Seas to reflect the fact that she returned to the fleet and is sailing Cuba. So overall, it was just a great production. It showed everything that went on with the Voyager class, gave a lot of details. When I got to the Oasis class, just like I mentioned last time, it did feel a little bit like a sales pitch, same with the Quantum class area, like they're trying to sell the current ship more than educate you on how it was accomplished. But overall, the show was still good. Not quite as good as one, which is really interesting. There's a lot of history and unknown stuff, but still an enjoyable one, especially if you enjoyed part one of it. And in addition to the Oasis, the Quantum class, it also included comments on the Icon class. So I'm sure in the future we'll get perhaps a part 3 that'll include some of these future ships. So then shortly after that ended, I made my way upstairs to the pool deck, got one last look around outside for the day before I headed back to the cabin to get ready for dinner. 'Cause tonight was the second formal night of the sailing, probably the only formal night that remained it, because we were supposed to have 3, but at this point it's unlikely we'll have a formal night 2 days in a row, and certainly not a formal night on the last night. So it looks like these 3 formal nights are compressed to 2. And with the second formal night, that is of course the lobster night for the menu. I don't eat seafood, so I obviously did not go for the lobster, but overall the menu was kind of lacking in the entrees today, so I made up my own meal for the evening. For my starter, I chose the artisan cheese platter from the dessert side of things. My entree, I got pear starters, the Vidalia onion tart that my waiter opted to get 2 of since it was being used as an entree, along with the minestrone. The Vidalia onion tart was delicious. That one's always delicious. It's basically a quiche. The minestrone, on the other hand, was not quite as good as it could have been. It tasted much more like a vegetable soup than a true minestrone like you'd expect. Still a good soup, but not for what it was supposed to be. And then for tonight, second formal night, there was a big focus on Royal Caribbean's 50th anniversary that included the waiters doing a song and parade to a newer, more upbeat set of music to represent the party of the 50th birthday bash. And to go along with that, for dessert, I got a trio of desserts. The Baked Alaska, which was just a slice of a Baked Alaska rather than the personal Baked Alaskas as we've seen on some of the other ships in the past. The Chocolate Lava Cake, which, as expected after that cookie, was incredibly soft and moist. It really didn't have the wet chocolate sauce in it like I was expecting it to, but it was still a good dish and came with ice cream. And then the big dessert of the night was the 50 years birthday bash cake, which was a personal cake with confetti, sprinkles, and vanilla cream to it, along with a large lollipop to celebrate. And that was an absolutely delicious dessert, probably the better out of the 3 that I had tonight. And that was the one that almost everybody in the dining room seemed to be getting tonight, as it was special for this evening and part of this bigger party that is happening on every ship in the fleet. So even if you're not going on the official birthday bash sailing coming up later this year, you can still be a small part of it, as they do have the special birthday dessert on every sailing of every ship in the fleet. Following dinner, then had a very busy night. Started at 7 p.m. in 270 with the Crown and Anchor Top Tier event. This one operated a bit different than the other ones. It featured the Royal Fleet Vistarama up on the screen as everyone entered. That it was the entire Royal Caribbean fleet sailing at night, and it remained at night the entire duration of the event. That was playing through as we waited for the official party, and at that time Island Vibes was playing in the venue as well. Once Chris Brown came out, he gave a little introduction to the hotel director, who then gave an absolutely beautiful speech all about the importance of guests and human kindness and just connecting people to people rather than technology and robots taking over, but the fact that the crew and the people are the ones that really make all these sailings special and are the ones that make everything so enjoyable and you want to return to it.
It's amazing. The thing about working on ships is working with the ladies and gentlemen that are part and parcel of the experience on board. How has the connection with the crew been on this one?
He then introduced many of the officers on board the ship before handing the mic back to Chris Brown, who gave a very short version of 270 tonight with an overview of the venue. First, start off featuring the Vistaramas. They did the test pattern video that we've seen many times to really show off what the venue is capable of and how it works. Then went into the robo shows and explaining the robots as well. For that one, they opted for Leonardo's Dream, which uses not just the robots for a robo show, but the Vistaramas as well to really take over the entire venue and give a nice little show. That one was the same one that we saw last time, so there's nothing really new about the event that we learned today. Once that concluded, they then ended the event with the Under the Water band playing on the Vistaramas for just one song before cutting back to the curtains and ending the overall show. Immediately following that, I headed to the Royal Theatre for Live.Love.Legs. At the same time, there was a conflict with the 270, which had virtual concert with the American Philharmonic Orchestra, which is the Vistarama for a live concert that launched with the Anthem of the Seas. The one from Quantum with Santa Fe and the Fat City Horns, of course, played yesterday, and we saw it on the Anthem and Quantum of the Seas. This one I have yet to actually see. We've seen bits of it included in 270 tonight, but never actually seen the entire show. But tonight, of course, that conflicted with Live.Love.Legs at 8:30, which was the second Roku Room production show, and one that I haven't even seen a variant of, so I had to attend that one, which meant missing that virtual concert. That show was incredible. What's really neat about it was the fact that they started and ended it with essentially the same song, same little bit, and it really brought the whole show full circle. It wasn't following a story, it wasn't overly complicated, it was just very basic enjoyment of music and dancing, which is something we haven't seen on recent shows. The closest is probably 270 to doing that, but we haven't seen a true production show that is entirely focused on that element and offering it to guests. And surprisingly, it was a very high-tech show. Not only did it use the video backdrop that we've seen used on other ships and added to the newest Oasis-class ships, in addition to that, it also utilized some holographic hackery during one scene to really give it a high-tech element to it and add a little more excitement and interest to the audience. You can clearly tell once that moment started, there was a little more interest than what had been going on prior to it. So that was 8:30. I then headed to 270 because at 10 o'clock was Dancing with the Stripes. This was, of course, listed as being on our first Anthem of the Sea sailing, which we did not get to attend. And on our second one, they did not include it. Symphony didn't include it, but Ovation did include it. And while sitting there, I realized we didn't have the quest, and it's not currently scheduled for tomorrow, so it's likely not happening on this voyage. Amazingly, though, Dancing with the Stripes can pretty well fill that void. It is the most fun, exciting game that I've seen added in a long time. Essentially, the quest has an issue of people wanting to just watch, and that's where this really works, because there's so much just viewership of it. There's only about 12 people that get to actively participate in the event, but it starts off with getting people to volunteer, put their names in a bag, one for dancing with the men, the other for dancing with the women, and Angel went through and introduced every contestant, all 12 of them, all the invisible stripes, as she referred to it as, which were the higher ranking staff that are not officially officers. That was people like the DJ, cruise director, staff, some lower level people that we often see, but they are not actually ranked stripes. For that, in addition to the contestants, they had two of the dancers from Live.Love.Legs over there to play the judge role, and that show seemed to go downhill with each round in a good way. Each round consisted of two songs, one a little more of a traditional song and dance, the second a little more extreme and fun. And with each round that went by, there were a couple groups eliminated until we were down to just two groups left, and those two performed together on the center stage before the audience got to pick which group they felt was the ultimate Dancing with the Stripes winner. And that was an absolutely hilarious show. It had all the humor of the quest. It had a bit of that dirty. It was not listed as adult only, but it certainly felt very edgy and dirty like the quest would be. It really did adequately fill the void for not having the quest. It had that same kind of energy when you left the venue, and it's one of those events that everybody's going to be talking about the rest of this cruise because it is that memorable. The venue was packed. There were officers packing in behind the guests. It was just a huge night for the Ovation season. That event was certainly much larger than I had anticipated and a whole lot more fun. I thought it would just be chance for guests to dance with the officers or a little bit of a dancing competition, but I was not anticipating it being just so hilarious and out of control like it was.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up
So that was 10 o'clock, lasted about an hour until 11 o'clock, but it was the end of my night for today, the end of my activities, and tomorrow we are at sea, so the ship's a little more live tonight than it's been the past couple days. We do have one interview though. We saw Live.Love.Legs tonight, the first time I've ever seen a Sequins and Feather production. And for interview, I got to sit down with the dance captain to learn about how all the dancers prepare and how they keep things in order. Today, I am joined by Lexie, who is the dance captain of Cast 6 on board the Ovation of the Seas. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Could you provide a little bit of background information on yourself?
Yeah, so I've been dancing since I'm about 3 or 2, and dancing all my life. I started at a small dance studio back at home in Jersey, and it was very recreational. I didn't really know what I was going to do. My senior year of high school, I was either going to go to school for science to be a doctor, or I was going to keep dancing. I didn't want to give up dancing, so I decided to try university for dance. So I went to University of the Arts in Philadelphia, and I did 1 year and decided that it was a bit too expensive for an artist. So I decided after my first year to just start auditioning that summer, go to auditions, and that's how I ended up getting my first ship job. Yeah.
So what made you want to join a ship, spend some time at sea?
Well, I actually never knew that this was an opportunity when I was younger. I never thought I'm going to grow up and be a dancer on ships. After my 1 year, one of my professors, he was like, well, you don't want to continue school, but I think you should try ships. You get to travel, you get to dance. I was like, okay, that seems cool. He was like, just go online, look up some auditions. So I found specifically Hairspray audition. So I went to New York, had a full day auditioning. I made it to the last call, and they were like, well, we'll get back to you. It took about 6 months to hear anything. I was like, I didn't get it. I'm just going to go to school and go for science, because that was my backup plan. I was like, I'm just going to go to school. And I finally got an email saying that they wanted me for the last cast of Hairspray on Oasis. And I was like, yeah, sure. It's something to do. I didn't really have any other plan. So I was like, why not? I got the job. Then we could just go and travel and dance. And I've been doing it ever since. So that was when I was 19. And yeah, I've been doing it for about 5 years now. Yeah.
So you are now the dance captain on board Ovation Seas for this cast. Yeah. How did you progress to that level?
It took a while. I actually didn't think I wanted to be for the longest time. You definitely grow and progress. Like on my first contract, I couldn't imagine 5 years ago me being here right now. And my last contract here, so my second contract on Ovation, I decided to go for dance captain, and it was just me and one of my friends going, and he ended up getting it before me, and I didn't really want it at the time. It was just me. I was like, well, let me just try. I never interviewed, because you have to get interviewed in rehearsals. And after that, it just kind of opened my eyes, and all my last contract here, I paid attention to what he was doing, and I would ask him about the paperwork and how he dealt with things, and I knew that if I came back here, I would want to go for it. So during these rehearsals, I decided to try again, and ended up getting it. Yeah, it was they definitely look for experience, especially me. Since I've been on the ship, this is my third time. I know the show's inside and out. They know I've been asking questions and talking to the office about it as well. So they know I've wanted it for about a year. And since I didn't get it last time, he said, definitely try for your next, and we'll be looking at you for the DC. So yeah, it's a really cool opportunity. A lot of responsibility with such a big cast as well, 22 people. It can be a bit challenging at times, but I have a really good cast to work with, so it definitely helps. Yeah.
So with the elevated position, what additional duties come with that?
So we have to make all the reports. So at the end of each voyage, we have to send a report to shoreside. I'm in charge of the entire cast, with any issues, they come to me first, and then I'll go to my manager about any issues they're having, whether them being sick, any problems within the cast. I try to help them figure things out, alleviate any issues. If there's a reblock, if someone's out of the show, I have to make sure the audience can't tell anyone is out. I have to move things around, move people around. I'm in charge of the understudy rehearsals, scheduling them, dance classes, putting the dancers into rotations for their extra duties that they have. So pretty much, yeah, supervisor position of the whole cast. Yeah.
So oftentimes with an elevated role, you're above the other people that you're supervising. With this role, you are still a member of the cast. You still have to dance alongside them.
Yeah.
How do you balance being a member of the team while also being in charge of the team?
Yeah, that can be really hard for a lot of people, actually. And I'm still trying to find that balance between a personal level and keeping it professional as well. So there's times where I feel like, okay, I got to step back from all the partying. Not saying that everyone parties all the time, but I'm like, okay, well, they're going out on some nights. Maybe I should step back and just keep it a bit separated, but know that I'm still. Hopefully they know that I'm still relate to them because I've been there. We have a few new hires as well, and I see that they are a bit intimidated by me, but I don't want them to feel that way. They do it because I have this position, but I'm like, I've been there. I've been a new hire. I've done things wrong, So it's just trying to get them to understand that I've been where they're at. Just because I'm at this position, I'm still one of their peers, Yeah, it's hard to find a balance, but I feel like we all are working together. And I know that they can come to me for anything, and I think that's really good for dance captain, because I've had some DCs where you just want to go to your manager, you don't feel comfortable enough with talking to your supervisor, who is actually your peer who you dance with. So can't say I pride myself on that, but I'm really glad that they are comfortable with me. Yeah.
So you're on a ship for months on end, but everyone gets sick once in a while. How do you deal with somebody that has to miss a show and making sure there's coverage for that? Yeah.
So hopefully you have a bit of a heads up. Just getting out of install, we had one of our dancers, she had fungal infection on her toenail, and she had to get it pulled off. Pretty gross. And but I knew she got that done, and we had like 5 days before our first show that she couldn't do. So I just hold an extra rehearsal, and I have to, before I have the rehearsal, I have to go through each number, figure out where she's at, where she's gonna, since she's out, who can replace her in that part, or how can I change formations to make it seem that there's nobody missing. And if a singer is out for the dream, we have dancer understudies for the main characters, and we have other singers who like interchange positions as well. So I have to hold an extra rehearsal every cruise for that, just in case, because they do get paid. So if a singer is out for that show that night, if we find out, just say we find out that morning, that night the understudy has to go in, so they have to be ready on the drop of a hat, right? So I have to make sure I know that if one of those dancers go into their understudy position, that all of their spots are covered in their dancing positions as well. Yeah. So it takes a lot of organization and thinking of what will look good, what won't look good if somebody's missing. Yeah. It's we haven't had to go through that yet, but I know everyone would be ready in that kind of situation as well. Yeah. Just yesterday, actually, we had a dancer, and he was feeling not too well. And he was telling me, Lexie, the second show, I'm going to start it, but if I don't finish, I will let you know. And I just have to go through my head. I'm like, okay, well, if he's out, who can go into his place like that? Who knows the choreography? So I have to make sure dancers that aren't in certain numbers, there's at least one of those dancers that know the choreography on stage, so they can go in as soon as possible. Yeah.
So Nick Ware has created a lot of different styles of shows since joining Royal Caribbean. Yeah. One of his latest styles to add is the Sequins and Feathers creations. On board here, there's one of those, Live.Love.Legs. Could you go over that a little bit?
Live.Love.Legs, I absolutely love Live.Love.Legs. It's one of my favorite of the 3 shows. Yeah, so Live.Love.Legs is very glitz and glam. It's bringing Vegas to the sea. Vegas to the sea, pretty much. with the big backpacks, the tall showgirls. It just reminds me there's a show in Vegas actually called Vegas to Show. And it just reminds me of that, just very big and over the top, yeah. And I feel like the audience, it's not a story to follow. It's just about watching and enjoying and just like having a good time, yeah. Hopefully they see that we're having a good time and they enjoy it as well.
So that style is a bit different than the other ones. It's much more dance focused. So what extra skills and mastery must you have compared to the other ships in the fleet?
Compared to the other, well, for the girls, for sure, it's very different because it's very showgirl based compared to other shows where you use a lot of your technique. It's very, the way you hold yourself, the way you hold your feet in a certain position. You constantly have to be held up because we have these big headpieces on, which other shows don't have that at all, and these big backpacks. So you have to hold yourself a certain way, which I was never used to before I came to the ship. I had to get used to it. And the way we have to walk facing forward or our backpacks will get bent or hit other people. So you have to definitely get used to the way you move because it's different than the way you're trained growing up, for sure. Like the Dream is so different. So it's hard for the office to cast these shows because they need a dancer to do a very modern, contemporary type of hip-hop show like Live.Love.Legs compared to the Dream, which is very earthy, jazz, very technical. So they have to find a balance. So it is really hard to find dancers able to do both shows and to have both shows look good. They've done a really good job, actually.
Yeah. So with Live.Love.Legs, there are a lot of large costumes, as you've mentioned. What extra difficulty does that if the ship is moving and just moving around in general? Yeah,
the backpacks make it very hard because we have to always be facing a certain way or we'll be hitting each other. So when it's rocking, it's just all about using the core so you're not toppling over. There's this one backpack, the yellow backpack. It's the most expensive piece in the show. It's pretty sure it's about 10 to 12 pounds. And if you're not standing right and the ship rocks a certain way, it will take you over. So you have to make sure, and you're never standing balanced on 2 feet. You're always beveled. So all of your weight is on one. So if the ship goes one way, the backpack will bring you that way. So you constantly have to like work on your core, engage in your core the whole time. So the backpacks don't tip you over either way. Yeah, it's again something to get used to. Yeah, especially new hires coming to the ship. They will just practice and walking around in their backpack because it's something they've never done before. Yeah, really cool.
So in addition to Live.Love.Legs, the second show is The Beautiful Dream. How does that show compare and what is your role in there?
Yeah, the shows are very different. With The Dream, it's actually has a story to follow, which when you watch it, you've seen it. It's very cut and paste. There's a story. But with Live.Love.Legs, there's nothing really to follow. It's just visually amazing. But with The Dream, it's also visually amazing. The set is absolutely beautiful. Yeah. For me, one of my roles, I'm just one of the dancers supporting the other main characters. So when you see, I don't know if you recognize me, I am somewhere in the background, but we are just supporting the main actors and the singers in the show. Yeah.
So you've made it to Dance Captain with Cast 6. What's next for you?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'll do another contract, but if I do, I don't know what ship I would actually want to go to, but I would like to be DC. If you're not guaranteed DC for a next contract, but I would go for it for sure. If not, I wouldn't be too upset about it. It's been an experience. And I've enjoyed it, but you're not always guaranteed dance captain because there's someone else who has more experience than you who's also done plenty of contracts as DC. I've only done one, so you never really know. But I would actually possibly like to be on land at some point, but yeah, you never know. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell the viewers?
Yeah, if you want to see some really good shows, come to Ovation of the Seas. We have a new itinerary that's really cool. Coming to Ovation of the Seas is the first time it's coming to Alaska. So if you want an Alaskan cruise with beautiful shows to see, come to Ovation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, of course, I have to thank her for taking the time to talk to me. That was a very different show than a lot of the other Royal Caribbean production shows. It was so much more focused on the dance, the music, and most amazingly, it was not a traditional classic vibe or a current pop. It was an all-out electric party vibe throughout the show from beginning to end. And then the dancers just bring that out even more with their costumes. The performance just overall was incredible, and it's great to learn a little more about how they handle things behind the scenes, some of the differences and how it compared to the other productions. So that about does it for today's episode. Tomorrow, of course, we are at sea, the first of 2 sea days, getting back down to Seattle this time instead of returning to Vancouver. So for now, I'm Derek Cohn. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the links.